Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Thursday. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky. Jeanie Buss has commented on the future of Frank Vogel, and Russell Westbrook has proven himself to be the locker room wingman that every teammate wants. We'll explain more coming up on Locked On Lakers.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I want to thank everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. As we post this thing, we try to get it up in the wee hours of the morning. No matter where you are, you can engage in the content, Andy. Listen to Locked On Lakers whenever you need to do it. Just make it the first thing you listen to every single day, and then make another Locked On podcast the second thing, and even the third thing. But after you make us the first thing. But let's start here, Andy. A bit of housekeeping. We have not mentioned this, I don't think, on the podcast. A lot of people probably know by now, but if you missed it, Kendrick Nunn, Frank Vogel said, will not play in the calendar year of 2021. He's not out for the season. He's not out for the year, but he's not coming back before the calendar flips over into January, which probably means he won't be on the floor for a couple weeks into the new year. So once again, no Kendrick Nunn.
Yeah, I mean, this struck me as significant, Brian, just because this was as specific as we've heard Frank Vogel, not just about Kendrick Nunn, but players, period.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the Lakers and by extension Vogel are very cagey in terms of specifics when it comes to guys and their health and how long they're expected to be out. But hearing Frank Vogel talk about it in those terms, raised my eyebrows in part because it really made me feel like Kendrick Nunn ain't going to be around anytime soon.
Mm-mm.
If anything, it kind of concerned me that he was willing to go out on that type of limb. You ain't going to be seeing him in 2021.
And this is especially relevant today, Andy, because Mark Medina of USA Today now. Mark's still at USA Today, correct? Caught up with Jeanie Buss.
Or no, he's with NBA.com.
No, thank you. Yeah, NBA.com. And
he's well-traveled like us.
He is. And he caught up with Jeanie Buss at halftime of Tuesday's win over Boston, a game that every Lakers fan and certainly everyone inside the Lakers organization hopes can be kind of a jumping off point going forward into this road trip, road heavy schedule, I should say. And asked Jeanie about Frank Vogel's job security. And Jeanie said that until, and it's a quote, until we're 100% healthy, I don't think you can really make any judgment. I really don't know what you're looking for me to say. I would say that until we're 100% healthy, I won't make any judgments about anything. Were you surprised to hear Jeanie kind of look at it that way? I'm sure she was trying to remain as non-committal as possible, but basically the concept of until we're healthy and get a chance to look at this team intact or more or less intact, nobody around here is making any big choices.
No, in part because I actually think that's the most accurate and I think really smart way to go about doing this. I mean, we've talked about this a lot, Brian. I mean, we've obviously had impressions of the team from having watched every single game. Mm-hmm. But the truth is, it is really difficult to know just how good they can be, just how far behind the eight ball they actually are, other than just the time that they've missed being together, because we've seen so little of this roster intact. Kendrick Nunn hasn't played. Trevor Ariza hasn't played.
Right.
The big three has had all these games scattered. So in that sense, like, it's actually, I think, a pretty logical way of looking at it. Also, it doesn't surprise me because I'm not sure it even matters. Because as you will recall, during Luke Walton's final year with the Lakers, Jeanie Buss a few times very outwardly, and I would even say emotionally, gave Luke Walton her vote of confidence and support, but also made it very clear, these are not my decisions. And we know this because Magic wanted to fire Luke. That was incredibly obvious to anybody paying the slightest bit of attention. And, that became a thing between him and Jeanie. But ultimately, Jeanie was not going to stand in the way of it happening. It just became so complex that ultimately it led Magic to believe, among many reasons, that he was not the right guy for this job. or this job wasn't right for him,
right
got in
for
the way of
him.
his tweeting.
It did, and that got in the way of all of our enjoyment. So
Yes, it
I'm
did.
glad he managed to figure out a way to get around that.
Did you see, by the way, his advice for the Lakers with their defense, the things that they need to improve? He said 3 things. They need to improve their individual
Mhm,
defense, the team defense, and transition defense,
mhm.
to which I retweeted at Cam Brothers. So basically all aspects of
Right,
defense.
but and yeah, I saw that you were mocking Magic about that, but then they went out Tuesday and played a great defensive game, and so, I mean, he's right, it
Well, I
worked.
didn't say he was wrong.
Find
I'm
the
just-
lie, Andy. No, it's funny. We got an interesting comment from a frequent commenter on the YouTube channel, Locked On Lakers YouTube channel, Merlai, and I am going to just slaughter your last name. I'm really sorry about that. Merlai Balasabramian, I believe, is how
Okay.
it should be pronounced, or could be at the very least.
Don't say
Um,
should be.
I'm going to say
That's
could
rather
be,
arrogant.
can be pronounced. Whatever I just said is
Should
one
be.
way it
Are you
can be.
offering suggestions?
I am. I'm offering the way that I just said it as the preferred pronunciation of Merlai's last name. I'm surprised that there's this fire Vogel movement by the media and fans, but nobody seems to talk about who's walking through that magic door to replace him. And I think that's an interesting one. First of all, for 2 reasons. First, this idea that there's this kind of this movement and where it comes from. I've seen a couple other commenters talking about like this being kind of a media generated thing. And I suppose there is kind of a chicken and egg. The Lakers don't play well. People start asking questions. Then you have to ask the team. The team responds. The players respond. And then that becomes something that drives the cycle. So I get that. But the other part about this is I think really important. And I think the biggest reason the Lakers aren't in any real hurry is that nobody seems to be talking about who's coming next to replace him. Unless you think David Fizdale is the answer, unless you think, I guess, dropping Terry Stotts, just, brand new into this
Yeah.
situation is the answer. Phil Handy, something that would make an appreciable improvement over what you have. It doesn't do you any good to fire Vogel. One of the biggest questions you have to ask when you're replacing coaches, who is going to be next? And if the reason that you'd want to let Vogel go is because you think you need a better coach, then you have to have a better coach ready to go. And I think that's not something that's really out there. They might have we just need to try something, change the culture, whatever thing, 10, 15 games from now. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. But I think the other big thing is like there isn't a natural replacement out there where you look at it and you say, well, this would be a better choice than Frank Vogel.
No,
At least to me.
Nobody that really comes to mind. Discussing the reasons that it could end up happening is not the same thing as advocating for it. I think you and I have been very clear that even if we understood why Frank Vogel eventually got fired, and this was, more applicable a few weeks ago when they were under 500, stuff like that, that's not the same thing as wanting him fired. Just believe me when I say, when we want him fired, you will know. Anybody who's followed us for a long time, listened to us for a long time, read us, knows when we believe a coach should be fired, we take no enjoyment in saying so, but we will say so. So
Yes.
until you hear us actually say Frank Vogel should be fired, don't presume that we're talking about this because we're trying to get him fired.
No. When we both of us on a personal level really like Luke Walton, but we both agreed that there was a point at which he needed to go.
We both like Byron Scott a lot. He's been on our show.
Never should have been hired, but needed to go.
Mike Brown, you can't find a more prince of a person. He was a
needed to
terrible
go.
hire. Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about Russ, because there was a moment in the third quarter of Tuesday's win that really went undetected until after the game, at which point it went completely viral on social media and opens up a couple different conversations that we want to have. We'll do it next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Shopify, the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. Subscription-based software that allows anyone to set up an online store and sell products. Shopify store owners can also sell in physical locations using Shopify POS or point-of-sale app and accompanying hardware. Shopify gives entrepreneurs the resources once reserved for big businesses, so startups, upstarts, and established businesses alike can synchronize online and in-person sales and stay effortlessly informed. Shopify powers over 1.7 million businesses from first sale to full scale. reaching customers online and across social networks with an ever-growing suite of channel integrations and apps, including Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and more. So go to shopify.com/lockedonnba, all lowercase, for a free 14-day trial. Get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Grow your business with Shopify today. Go to shopify.com/lockedonnba right now. Shopify.com/lockedonnba.
Hey, Andy, do you know why free trials renew without your consent? It's because it's a business scam out to get you. And don't let greedy corporations pocket your money. Download Truebill to take control of your subscriptions. Truebill, Andy, it's the new app that lets you identify and stop paying for subscriptions you don't need, want, or simply forgot about. On average, people save up to $720 a year with Truebill. Get a handle on your subscriptions, people. Because companies make subscriptions hard to cancel, Truebill makes it incredibly simple. Just link your accounts and Truebill will cancel your unwanted subscriptions in one tap. And Truebill, your Truebill concierge is there when you need them to cancel unwanted subscriptions so you don't have to do it. Over 2 million users Truebill has, and it's helped them save over $100 million. So don't fall for subscription scams. Start canceling today at Truebill.com/lockedonnba. So go right now, Truebill.com/lockedonnba. It could save you thousands a year. Truebill.com/lockedonnba. All right. So by now, most people are familiar with the Enes Kanter Freedom versus LeBron James thing.
And now Jeremy Lin.
And now Jeremy Lin. And these are really sort of one-sided things where, Enes Kanter Freedom is kind of bringing these people's names into what he is trying to do, I guess, ostensibly to raise awareness over human rights in places like China and other things. And we'll get to that in a second. LeBron has sort of steadfastly chosen not to engage.
Yeah. And this, by the way, should be noted just because it's going to, I think, inform a lot of the conversation that we have. This is something that has been going on between LeBron and Enes Kanter Freedom for a long time, like several years, and it has been always quite one-sided.
Right. It's really flared up in a big way over the last like 3 weeks or so. Every day, we're like, oh, wait a minute, we're kind of a couple days behind. And every day something, seems to happen where it becomes relevant again. But anyway, so LeBron has sort of chosen not to engage, even as this has become a much more prominent part of the news cycle with Freedom appearing on TV shows and other things to talk about LeBron and calling him out and all these other things. So in the third quarter of Tuesday's win over Boston with Enes Kanter Freedom sitting on the bench, I believe after what appears to be some sort of Boston turnover, Russell Westbrook goes up. If you haven't seen the clip, we'll tweet it out at Cam Brothers. You can find it anywhere on the internet. Goes over to the Boston bench and aggressively just starts applauding and clapping and cheering in the face of Enes Kanter Freedom. Very, very deliberate. This is not an accidental, just happened to be sitting there. I thought it might be, Peyton Pritchard. So I had no idea it was.
What you did, Romeo Langford.
Right. He knows who is sitting in front of him. He's not confusing him for Josh Richardson or anything like that. And he is taking up for LeBron. He is the wingman who is taking offense to the thing that LeBron is like, I'm not going to take it. And like, he's that friend. He is that guy it struck me even beyond some of the conversation about, I guess the politics of all this stuff. This is one of the things that when you talk about what Russ brings to a squad, that teammates love, that organizations love, they loved him in Oklahoma City for things like this. He is a loyal dude. If you are on his team, he will go to the end of the earth for you. And this was a great example of the teammate that is Westbrook and why that's important for the dynamic the Lakers have.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen a lot of people point out, and this may actually be true, what went on between Russ and Freedom during last night's game may not have been like a wholly personal feud because they were teammates for a while in OKC. From what I understand, they got along really well. It may not have reached like acrimony between them, but at this point, at this stage where we are right now, LeBron is his dude. And he's going to be there for his dude. And like you said, it is not accidental. I cannot believe that he chose that moment to go directly at Freedom. It also reminded me, Brian, just in terms of like what Russ has been as a teammate and like really being renowned as like a ride or die dude for his teammates. You know, you talked about OKC where, you know, it was not always easy with Russ. He is famously like OCD to the nth degree. You need to arrange the entire franchise's schedule around him. Like everything needs to be at the times that he wants it. Also, I hadn't thought about this for years, but I did a profile for a long time ago on Nick Collison when he was with the Thunder about just like the rare role player who stays with one franchise his entire career.
Mm-hmm.
And the Thunder were in town playing the Lakers. So I went into the visitors' locker room and I was trying to get obviously quotes from Durant and Westbrook because they were the guys who'd been there the longest with him. And I think it's been pretty firmly established that Russ does not enjoy doing media and will take as few questions as possible. He gave me extra time because he wanted to talk about Collison. Like that was something that he genuinely enjoyed doing. When I mentioned to him after the regular scrum was done that I was hoping to get time with him separately because I wanted to talk about Collison, his face lit up, like genuinely lit up. For that matter, so did Durant. Durant actually gave me time after the Thunder PR person said that he was done. And Durant was like, no, I'll talk about Nick. But like he is somebody that I think genuinely wants to see Russell Westbrook, his teammates thrive and be a part of that thriving, even if he's not always the easiest guy to play with and thrive. Like you got to do a lot of things Russ's way, but I do think he wants to be there for his teammates.
Well, I think probably this is part of the reason that the whole Paul George thing is a little sensitive, and why he doesn't really love talking about it. But you know, beyond that, like when we were analyzing, you know, we were as skeptical as anybody, or certainly as open as anybody about the potential downsides of acquiring Westbrook. Here are the problems. Here's where it may not work. Here's why it could be problematic. But you know, at some point, you got to start talking about, oh, okay, well, here's what he does bring. I mean, he's not like a garbage player or anything. And one of the things that we talked about, though, was when you get into January, February, after Christmas, that's sort of the dog, whatever really considered sort of the dog days of the NBA season. Russ brings a certain energy. He brings a certain fire to what you're doing that lifts up your teammates. We're not there yet. The Lakers have plenty to be worried about.
I was going to say they may have solved that problem on their own by allowing for no dog days. They're not playing well enough for dog days.
The complacency issue really shouldn't be a thing yet. Like no. They haven't earned that yet. But
they already used it up.
Right. Well, maybe I hope they don't use any more on Friday against the Thunder. But like you can see that kind of thing. Teammates notice that. Teammates see this clip. They might have missed it in real time, but they've seen the clip.
I didn't notice it in real time.
No, I mean, it was 3 seconds of time at the top of the screen after a turnover where everybody's not looking. And this was an example of the other stuff I think that Westbrook brings. That's important to point out. Let's take a minute here though to talk about the actual kind of the controversy that is now, if you want to call it that, surrounded Kanter Freedom with LeBron and the way LeBron is sort of handling it, and what we think it means in the way that Freedom is handling it. And we'll do all that next.
Locked on Lakers brought to you by Stance. I've been hearing a lot about Stance apparel lately because they just launched a new line of active apparel. It's perfect timing for the holidays. It's the coolest gift you can give. Not the boring old socks, underwear, and apparel you had to pretend to like just to be polite. Like you're going to be stoked to find Stance apparel under the tree. Founded in 2009, Stance apparel represents a radical reinvention of socks, underwear, and active apparel. Sharp focus on comfort, quality, and creativity. Stance brings an atypical aesthetic alongside pop culture's hottest collaborators for the ultimate in style and self-expression, because everything you wear should be a direct extension of who you are. Some of my favorite collaborations include Wu-Tang Clan, Batman, Star Wars, The Office, Bob Marley, and obviously the NBA. That is pretty incredible variety. Stance believes that the perfect fit matters more than fitting in. Those who feel good, do good. See for yourself. Register for an account at stance.com. Get 15% off your first purchase. Use the promo code Locked On at the checkout to apply. Enjoy the color and comfort of a life less ordinary with Stance.
So, I mean, as we mentioned, LeBron has chosen sort of not to engage in what's going on here, and I think that is smart. Um, it is almost inevitably going to be seen as LeBron punching down to some degree, to me at least. In engaging in a back and forth with Enes Kanter. Enes Kanter Freedom is his name. I mean, some people are cynical about that. It's a guy's name. We're going to call him by his name. What is happening with him, though, is, it's disappointing to me because to me, this is one of these situations where multiple things are true at once. I believe he is genuine about his interest and devotion and to human rights. He comes from, if you don't know Enes Kanter's story, Freedom's story, go read it. Like, the guy, if he goes back to Turkey, they're going to kill him. Like, he comes by these things.
Well, he is
honestly,
an exile. He's a legitimate exile.
and he knows of what he speaks in this regard, particularly as it regards to Turkey. He is not wrong about the human rights abuses of the Uyghurs, which is his main topic of conversation in China. He's not wrong at all. He is not wrong about Venezuela, which is another topic that he's talked about. Where he has, to me, the disappointment of it is both in the dragging of people who aren't necessarily related. Jeremy Lin, most recently, telling him to, how he turned his back on his homeland. By the way, Jeremy Lin is from Torrance.
Yes. Specifically by playing basketball in China.
Right. He is, he's turning his back on Taiwan. And by dragging LeBron in, essentially for attention, talking about the hypocrisy as a way to try to amplify his own cause. And because of that, he has been co-opted by people who have zero interest in anything that he's talking about and are only there for the shut up and dribble part of his sort of speech, which is completely egged on by the Tucker Carlsons of the world, if you missed that interview, and the other people in generally right-wing media who are encouraging it.
Tucker Carlson essentially got Freedom to say shut up and dribble to his NBA teammates, the ones that would ever criticize anything about America and its government, which I think goes against any type of freedom message that I can think of.
The whole point of having freedom of speech is the ability to criticize one's government.
Right. He, of all people, should know this because he is an actual exile over a situation like this. Like, he cannot go back to Turkey because of the issues that he has with Erdogan, their leader. And, it's interesting, you had mentioned, like, Jeremy Lin, he's from Torrance. Like, his heritage may be Taiwanese, but the people, his country and his people, in the most, I think, literal sense, are actually Americans. And,
yes,
obviously,
he is an American.
Right. His Taiwanese heritage, I think, is very personal to Jeremy Lin. For that matter, I believe he has some heritage that's Chinese as well. I've never gotten any impression that he's nothing but quite proud of it. And, he's been through a lot as one of the very few Asian Americans with his type of profile in sports, much less the NBA. But the very broad brush, haphazard way that Freedom threw Jeremy Lin into this, I think, is very indicative of how he goes about approaching this stuff, not just for the attention that he very clearly is not just seeking now, but has sought his entire career. He is somebody that has loved to be a flamethrower, has loved to be talked about, has loved to be feuding like WWE style with people around the league. But I think in doing that, you dilute whatever message you're trying to put out there. And also, too, you put yourself in a position where you are being incredibly holier than thou without noting your own place in this machine and, your own place in the larger problem that we're dealing with in terms of, disentangling Chinese money from Nike, for example, which is what he's taking shots at LeBron over, and Nike in general, or the
He
NBA.
wears the shoes.
Right. Well, this is something we look, all of us are hypocrites with this stuff to some degree. We all are. It is impossible. It is impossible to take up for a cause and not find some way where your lifestyle could be seen as going against that type of cause.
Well,
Like
and
life,
particularly when it comes to,
global
engaging in
economics.
the world
Yes.
and trying to avoid engaging or doing things that benefit China. It's
Right. I
impossible.
mean,
It's very
right.
difficult to do.
This stuff is incredibly complicated to try to disentangle. And I want to make it clear, like that sort of that degree of hypocrisy that all of us have, it's okay on some level. Like putting people to purity
Mhm.
tests with this sort of thing is a performative waste of time. Like nobody would pass. But there's also baselines to any type of hypocrisy before it starts becoming too much. And for example, like freedom is part of a league, and his freedom and his Kanter Freedom is part of a league, the NBA, that has gone out of its way to create as much of an economic imprint as possible in China. Like this is a fact. He has also made over $100 million in his career. Like he should have the financial wherewithal and resources to leave the NBA if he doesn't believe in taking money generated by China or that caters to China. And I want to make it clear, I'm not saying he's
Not saying
obligated
he
to do
should,
this.
but I'm saying he
No,
could.
right. He could do this. So you can still take the stances that you want, that these human rights violations are worth us paying more attention to as Americans. They are worth us trying to see what more we can do about trying to alleviate them. But you have to at least acknowledge your part in all of this.
Mhm.
Because if he thinks he's above it all, man, he is sadly mistaken. And then the part, Brian, that you bring up about how he is just allowing himself to be co opted. And this is, I think, also gets back to the haphazard way that he's going about doing this. Like he was interviewed, I think, at a scrum after the Tucker Carlson appearance. And he said that he doesn't do politics. This is a quote from him. I don't do politics. I do human rights. There's a thin but huge line between human rights and politics. If he actually thinks that he can appear on what is arguably the most hyper partisan, high profile show in America and not, quote, do politics, I'm sorry. He's too naive to serve as a spokesperson, like a
I will say
positive,
this:
productive one.
even if you accept him at his word that his motivation isn't politics, he's not going on Tucker Carlson because he's a Republican. I mean, look, he's very supportive of the Black Lives Matter.
Sure.
His his teammates who in support of Black Lives. The point isn't is he a hypocrite here, there, or whatever. It's like that naivete. Even if you take him at his word that he's not going on Tucker Carlson because he appreciates Tucker's Republican politics. I mean, I don't even think you can call his politics classically Republican anymore either, but that's a whole other conversation. Even if he's not doing politics, Tucker Carlson is.
Yes.
And
Yeah, I
so,
would say the same thing if he appeared on, say, Joy Reid's show,
correct.
which is going to be
They
hyper
are,
partisan in the opposite direction.
when they ask the question, what do your teammates think about you and your, stance that you should, embrace freedom and talk about and not criticize America and all these other things? That is politics. That's him
Yes.
playing to his. Tucker Carlson doesn't give a rat's bleep about the Uyghurs. He doesn't. And what he does care about is making LeBron James look stupid.
Yeah.
And LeBron James looked like a hypocrite. And the black league of the NBA looked like a bunch of hypocrites because they make white people feel bad. And that's the disappointing part. And then I'll finish my end of it with this. The point, he is, again, multiple things can be correct at one time. He is correct. Everyone in this country has it better than we do in other countries around the world. In Turkey, more freedoms than you have in Turkey, more freedoms than you have in oppressive regimes around the world. There's no question. We're also not supposed to be judging ourselves and comparing ourselves to Iran or Saudi Arabia or Turkey or whatever. We are judging ourselves and our progress and our society based on the expectations and the standard that we set here. And when people criticize this country, and they should be, I think, most people who criticize because they want the country to uphold its ideals. And that isn't the same as not appreciating your freedom. That's holding your country to a certain standard.
Right.
I'm not saying everybody, but most people who do these things are doing it because they want to participate equally in what the promise of America is supposed to be. And so shut up and dribble in that way because, hey, you have it way worse in Iran or Turkey or North Korea or many other countries around the world is not an adequate response to that, to the questioning. And it is a shame that Kanter Freedom, who comes by this position very honestly based on where he comes from, allowed himself to be suckered into that such an obvious,
Yeah. I
political
mean,
place.
particularly, while talking with a host who had spent like a week exalting Viktor Orban, Hungary's prime minister, who on his best day would be considered an authoritarian.
Mm,
This is a show that has
one of
propped up.
many, right?
Yeah, this is a show that's propped up the Trump administration that was chummy with Erdogan, who he had called the Hitler of Turkey and put him in the position of having to be in exile in the first place. Like, these are all things that Freedom either seems unaware of through not having done enough vetting, or doesn't care because
Just
he wants the
there's
attention.
he likes the attention. Go read
And then,
we'll finish. Go read Candace Buckner's column she wrote about
yes,
Cantor Freedom for the
Washington Post.
Washington Post. It's I don't want to summarize it because I won't do it right,
It's
but
very
go
good.
read it. It's very
The,
good and gets to some of what you're talking about.
the last thing I want to say on this, just so it doesn't appear like this has just been a PSA on behalf of LeBron, like, when this stuff specifically with China came up initially a few years ago, forget uh, Freedom's most recent tweet calling out LeBron and so-called king and all that stuff. A couple years ago with Daryl Morey's tweet, standing with
Mm-hmm.
Taiwan, and this is happening while the Lakers and I believe the Nets were
Right.
in
And
China.
LeBron's confronted with that and basically
Right.
punts. I don't know
Yes,
enough.
and yes, he did punt. And I remember I actually directly asked LeBron because this was happening at a scrum after they had gotten back, and LeBron had said the line about not really knowing much about the issue, which is a cop out. And I directly asked LeBron, "Do you plan on learning more about this issue?" And his answer was a non-answer, which again is a punt. And it was surprising to see somebody as planned out and intelligent as LeBron have seemingly no answer for this, even if I think he was correct that Daryl Morey's tweet was incredibly poorly timed with those teams in China.
Mm-hmm.
LeBron, I, I don't disagree with the idea that LeBron plays a role in this or could play a role in this. I don't think he can directly stop these things from happening if he threatens to leave Nike the way Freedom and I think frankly other people who are just bad actors present this. But there is a responsibility that LeBron has, however large you want to make it, and his answers there were clumsy and unsatisfactory. But the one thing though that I've never heard anybody articulate is what end game they have in mind for LeBron if, say, he takes this strong stance against human rights violations in China and what is happening over there. Where do you want him to go from there? Because if he takes this type of stance vocally, forget whatever economic jeopardy he creates for Nike, for the NBA, for his peers in the league, forget all of that. What is he supposed to do from there? Is he supposed to continue playing in the NBA and wearing these shoes that are apparently blood money? Because at that point, you're asking him to just pronounce all of this as bad and evil. And then what? Quit? Like, what's he supposed to do? Like, I don't understand what the actual end game for a lot of people in this
Yeah.
criticism of LeBron is supposed to be, even if you would like to see him
Because
do more.
yeah,
It's
because
incredibly complicated.
for a lot of people, it's not really even about the end game. It's
Right.
just about disliking
Because
LeBron. I mean, we could do it. We could do 2 hours on stuff around this, and we don't have time to do it today. But I have a feeling Enes Kanter Freedom is going to give us another opportunity to discuss these issues at some point. Anyway, so the Lakers have a couple big road games to finish off the week. A lot to talk about through the weekend and into next week as the mostly road stretch continues. Want to thank everybody for making us your first listen of every day. Remind you to subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. Locked On Lakers on YouTube. We'll see everybody Friday.